Well, this is our part of the Qatar Economic Forum by Bloomberg. I'm so pleased to welcome the Marriott CEO, Tony Capuano, to this part of our conversation. Tony, it is great to see you. I wanted to start. Thank you for joining us. I want to start with the big picture here because we know inflation is rampant. The Federal Reserve and other central banks are raising interest rates, and there's greater conviction now that recession is looming in Europe and the US. What is that doing? How is that showing up in the global travel and lodging industries from where you sit?
Interestingly, at least to date, it's not. The pace of recovery is really encouraging and really consistent. If you looked at the end of the first quarter, obviously we had a bit of an interruption in January and February from the Omicron variant. But in March, our global revenue per available room was only down 9%. In April, it was only down 7%. And in the US, our largest market, we were back to 2019 RevPAR levels. And so all of the potential headwinds you describe, we're monitoring in real time, but we've not seen it in the forward booking data so far.
So hotels clearly are benefiting from revenge travel. In which markets and in what specific ways are you seeing that demand improve this summer?
Well, certainly we've seen the recovery broadly and globally led by leisure travel. But the really encouraging piece for our business is we're also seeing parallel recovery in business transient travel and in group. And in fact, if you look at the forward bookings for group, during our first quarter earnings call, we suggested that in the last 3 quarters of 2022, group demand would be down high single digits to 2019. Based on what we've seen just over the last 60 days, we now believe we'll only be down mid-single digits. And last month, we were only down 6% to 2019. Business transient has been a little slower to recover, but even there, at the end of the fourth quarter last year, we were down about 30%. We're now down only about 10 to 15%. So not as rapid a recovery, but quite steady recovery. The other thing sorry, go ahead.
Oh, no. I want to dig into that business aspect a little bit here because the advent of hybrid and remote work has really blurred the line between business and leisure. And you're seeing people bring their families along with them on business trips. How are you changing up your offerings to capture travelers who are staying at your properties for both work and in many cases for play as well?
You're raising maybe one of the most fascinating and what we think is one of the most enduring trends that'll come out from the pandemic. And that's this idea of blended trip purpose. In our first quarter earnings call, we talked quite a bit about analyzing demand recovery by day of the week. And in a pre-pandemic world, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday were the traditional business travel days. Friday, Saturday, the traditional leisure days. And Thursday and Sunday were weaker shoulder days. Thursday and Sunday have actually been 2 of the days of the week that have recovered most quickly, which I think empirically illustrates the point you make, that more and more of our guests are combining business and leisure travel. While it is more difficult to modify the physical environment, perhaps, some of the programming that we're doing in terms of fitness, spa, food and beverage is really reflective of those evolving demand patterns.
That is really interesting how Thursday and Sunday have become the big busy days of the week for you. You mentioned modifying the properties. Maybe that's not even necessary because I understand you are competing with Airbnb in offering private homes for rent. Is this a way to prevent customers from leaving the Marriott family, or is this more about capturing a new client base?
I think more the former. When we talk to our customers and what we hear from them informs so many of our strategic decisions, we heard from those customers that for a very specific trip purpose, a multi-bedroom full home better served their needs. And so to your point, the launch of Marriott Homes and Villas really allows us to keep them within that Marriott ecosystem. And during the pandemic, we saw explosive growth in that platform. Pre-pandemic, we only had about 3,000 listings globally. We're now plus or minus about 60,000 listings.
So you had said earlier that summer bookings are looking pretty good. Forward bookings are looking very encouraging. This is, of course, in spite of rising prices on everything, whether it's food to plane tickets to car fuel. What kinds of adjustments or concessions do you see customers making, travelers making against this backdrop of quickening inflation?
Well, again, it varies so significantly by market. If you are in a leisure market, which has recovered most quickly, the pricing power is pretty remarkable, and customers understand that. They may be modifying their dates if that price doesn't fit their budget, or if that budget has been constricted by airline prices or gasoline prices. But we've really seen no slowdown in the strength of that pricing power. We do see some of our customers perhaps picking urban destinations, which have been a little slower to recover and therefore a little more modest in terms of pricing. But in leisure destinations, we've seen remarkable pricing power. In fact, here in the US over Memorial Day weekend, our average rate during Memorial Day weekend was 25% higher Memorial Day weekend in 2019.
Very quickly, Tony, what's an example of a small imperceptible change that Marriott has made in response to your rising costs as well?
Well, by necessity through the pandemic, we continued, as we always do, to look for operating efficiencies. Although not all of those efficiencies are specifically to cut costs, we think, for instance, through the use and greater adoption of some of the technology we have in place, it creates capacity for our employees to more deeply engage with our guests. And I think you'll continue to look for us to identify those opportunities.
Tony, I want to thank you so much for your time. Tony Capuano is CEO of Marriott.
Thank you very much.